Bonjour, shalom, and a big hello to all of our lovebirds, and welcome to our Valentine's Day episode of our second season of Calling an Audible, a podcast focusing on national, regional, and local sports news stories with our own special twist. My name is Zach Greenberg, and along with Greg Johnson, we are your hosts. Today we'll be talking about the inaugural week of the Alliance of American Football, the NBA and NFL free agency, and as well as some baseball news out of the Twin Cities. We'll have our Grind Our Gear segment, and we'll wrap it up with some UMC and wacky sports news. So to start off our show today, the Alliance of American Football is a brand new league started by Charlie Ebersol, the son of Dick Ebersol, who owns CBS. And, they had attempted to – we talked a little bit about this league on our last season of Calling an Audible, just kind of – seeing where we thought it would go, and now that the league has finally started, we actually have something to talk about for the league. So
still waiting on the XFL with Vince McMahon.
Yeah, well, we got a year left until then, but that'll I don't know what time of year that's supposed to be in. I'm assuming they're going to be competing with the Alliance League because there's no reason to try and compete with the NFL because it won't work.
No one can compete against
President
the NFL.
Trump already tried that about 20 years ago, and that didn't go so well for him. So
nope,
not as well as his current situation. But what did you think of Week 1 of the Alliance League?
It was different. I mean, one of the few highlights I saw, a quarterback got absolutely crushed, and it was not flagged for roughing the passer as it would have been in the NFL.
Yeah, it wouldn't have only been – he would have been called for targeting and probably suspended and fined for that hit.
I feel like the AAF is more, how you'd say, violence-prone.
Yeah.
Not necessarily like outright horrible.
I think they're just trying to steer away from all the flags that are kind of turning a lot of football fans off
like
from the NFL.
Yeah, they're trying to make football fun again, I think, is what their motto is. They're bringing into an aspect that we don't get to see in the NFL where it's old-time football, hard hits, no flags. And I believe it's going to show because when that quarterback got absolutely demolished. I don't know if any of you guys at home saw that clip, but wow, did he take a shot.
And the clip he's referring to, you can, if you go on Twitter or Google or YouTube or anything and just type in Alliance hit, and that'll be the first thing that comes up, and probably the first several things that comes up. And it was between the San Diego Fleet and the San Antonio Commanders. It was a Fleet player who, to put it nicely, destroyed the Commanders quarterback on that play, and his helmet came off. It was almost too perfect of a hit. It happened in the first game and in the first drive of the entire league. And you almost want to think that a play like that is almost too perfect for the Alliance League with all the controversy that's been going on in the NFL with, maybe quarterbacks being protected a little bit too much, even babied, it's almost kind of too perfect that the very first big play of this new league was the quarterback getting absolutely destroyed and his helmet coming off and there not being a single flag.
Yep, that's the template of the season. It's grown man football.
Absolutely it is. To talk a little bit more about the Alliance League, for all of our Minnesota listeners, to provide some relevance, the Salt Lake team has Matt Asiata, which is a name that you might recognize. He was a running back with the Vikings for 5 seasons. He was a backup there. He rushed for just under 1,300 yards over his 5 seasons. So this league gives players like him, players that maybe didn't have, amazing NFL careers, or they're still trying to get back into the NFL. It gives an opportunity for them to, stay in the game and create film and highlights so that they can potentially try and pursue the NFL again.
Yeah, Matt Asiata had 4 yards on 4 attempts with 1 touchdown. And another name I'd like to note is Brandon Oliver, the former, I believe, San Diego Chargers running back, is also on that team. Mm-hmm. And he had 40 yards and 8 attempts with no touchdowns.
Yeah, I mean, and anything's a start for, a lot of these guys have been out of football for a while. Like, I know on the Birmingham Iron, Trent Richardson, who was a former third overall pick, He did his time with the Browns, did his time with the Colts. He wasn't very good for either of them. He went up to Canada, played for the Saskatchewan Roughriders for a season, and also didn't perform very well. But in the first game for Birmingham, in a 26-0 shutout over Memphis, he had 2 touchdowns, both over 10 yards. So, for him, that's definitely a big step in the right direction.
You could almost compare the AAF towards how basketball players, they go overseas and then get drafted instead of going the college route.
Yeah.
I believe that's going to be up and coming for young players that decide not to do the 1 year at college. They'll just go overseas, get a little bit better experience in some regards, because I don't know if you heard about Luka Doncic saying it's easier to score in the NBA than where he played before getting drafted. So it's almost like, for instance, Trent Richardson, you were saying earlier before the podcast, he's going to get looked at by an NFL team sooner rather than later based on his performances. So I wonder how many other players in this league will get that opportunity.
Yeah, and there's lots of other former NFL players that have been talked about to get opportunities, or they're looking at, like Tim Tebow.
Former Vikings punter Jeff Locke is also on the Arizona Hotshots.
Yeah, and the Arizona Hotshots kicker used to play at Arizona State as well. So, another thing with this league is there's a lot of, connections to geographical connections, like with Trent Richardson having played at Alabama, and now he's playing for Birmingham. Just geographical situations like that. And, for my takeaways from week 1, I was pretty impressed with Birmingham pitching a shutout against Memphis. I was pretty impressed with Steve Spurrier and the Orlando team beating the Atlanta team 40-6. Steve Spurrier is the second most wins all time in the SEC, so this is his way back into coaching, to developing kids, doing what he loves to do.
I think I saw somewhere that coaches are getting roughly $500,000 to coach these teams.
Yeah.
So it's not a low-paying job where they're just like, we need a coach, will you do it? And we don't have much money. It's actually well-funded.
Right, and the players are getting 6 figures as well. It's not NFL money, but they're getting a couple $100,000 a year, comparable with the CFL. But it's interesting what's going to happen with this league. Is I think it's going to do very well because it's not at the same time as the NFL, and it's also not at the same time as the CFL. And you have a lot of different, you have the general football fan base, but those people, they sometimes switch over to basketball during the winter months because there's not much coverage, or to hockey. And, this gives them the opportunity to, stay with football throughout the offseason. And I think that will actually bode well for the NFL as well, as it will kind of keep fans interested in football and also interested in, NFL news, even as their offseason progresses.
Yep, absolutely. I agree with that.
Do you have a team that you've chosen to be your favorite yet?
That's a tough decision. It really is.
Yeah, I haven't decided who my favorite team is yet because, I just want to watch them a little bit more to try and decide.
It's too new of a league and too new of teams for me to have any idea on how it's going to turn out. And the teams with the biggest names are the ones that disappointed the most.
That's true, yeah. Memphis with Mike Singletary as coach, Christian Hackenberg as quarterback didn't put up a single point against Birmingham. Mm-hmm. And San Diego with Mike Martz as their coach, they didn't get a win either.
I'd have to go with the team that, as dumb as it's going to be to say it, the team that scores the most points collectively the entire season. So the best offense.
That's your prediction to win the championship?
Yep, and it'd be
so far?
Yeah, the team it's going to be the Orlando Apollos, I think.
Yeah, they put up a lot of offense this week. And I like the way they look, but when I was watching the Arizona Salt Lake game, I was pretty impressed with what their quarterback could do, and he wasn't their projected starter going into the season, but he ended up winning that job in camp. So I don't know if they're my favorite, but they looked pretty good, and I think that they might be a favorite to win the championship. But going into next week, you have Salt Lake playing at Birmingham. You have Arizona playing at Memphis, Orlando playing at San Antonio, and Atlanta playing at San Diego.
So I guess we'll find out, see how it goes, and maybe we can make more predictions next week once we have better stats to go off of. And it's another week older. But to move on, there's also some breaking news that potentially shapes the quarterback market in the NFL, and that is Joe Flacco being traded to Denver for a fourth rounder that can't go through until the new fiscal season, which is March 1st. And there was word on the street that Broncos were linked repeatedly to checking on Nick Foles because they really wanted him after what he's done yet again for a second consecutive season when Wentz goes down. And to be completely honest, I don't think Nick Foles would have done well in Denver. He seems to be a Philly guy, and for whatever reason, that team works well with him. Mm-hmm. It's like the situation where even if you sign a superstar caliber like LeBron James, he hasn't really done much with the Lakers. Yeah, like he did with the Cavaliers. It's just a connection to the place. It's a connection to place, and there's a key element missing that. Yeah, he's pretty entrenched in the Philadelphia community as well. Yep, there's a spark that is not there, and it's only prevalent when Foles is playing. It's a similar spark. I would even compare it to Case Keenum when he went to Denver, because he was just not the same player as he was when he was in Minnesota. I would almost give all the credit to Pat Shurmur on that one, because what he did with that offense for the Minnesota Vikings and what the Vikings offense did this year and how Case Keenum did this year, and even look at Sam Bradford. He started the year for a little bit before he went down. Signed, a 1 year, $20 million, and got cut like 3 weeks into the season. So I think it's a lot to do with the coaching, a lot to do with the player's mentality and how the team shapes up around the player. Yeah, I think this is a good trade for Denver, because I think they're getting a quarterback in Joe Flacco who is still, he's a Super Bowl champion. Yep, he won the MVP. And Super Bowl MVP. And I think he's still a good quarterback and can still produce in this league. And, Lamar Jackson took over for him in Baltimore. And, that's just, the way things work in football. It's a business. But I think that Joe Flacco can still – I think he's worth more than a fourth rounder, to be honest with you. But I'd say Denver did get a steal with that. Yeah, I think that they did too. But we'll see if this actually goes through come March 1st. But I don't see why it wouldn't. Other than Joe Flacco, the quarterback market is not very strong in this free agency class. You have Ryan Fitzpatrick, who showed – very, very hot flashes and then very, very cold flashes at the same time this season. Teddy Bridgewater, I know you Vikings fans love Teddy Bridgewater, even though he's Teddy Two Gloves, brutally injury prone. Yeah, but he has seemed to have been healthy, so he's in his defense. The first one was a stone cold hit that knocked him out for literally 10 seconds. Yeah, and then when you tear your ACL in a non-contact, what do you? Kind of sucks. Yeah. And then there's Nick Foles as well. So he's going to be franchise tag and then expected to be traded. Yeah. I'm curious to see what team's going to pay. I think Philadelphia just wants what's best for him at this point, because he's done a lot for that franchise. He won the Super Bowl for them. Their first ever Super Bowl. They're stuck between a rock and a hard place with their number 2 drafted overall quarterback, or who's injury prone, who's also equally injury prone, or Nick Foles, who it seems to be a every year thing where he just comes and saves the season. But other quarterbacks in the draft class this year: Tyrod Taylor, Ryan Fitzpatrick, and then honorable mentions. In the free agency class? In the free agency class, yep. Yeah. Trevor Siemian, Brock Osweiler, and Josh McCown are those are just backup. Those fillers. Are going to be backups for different teams. Yeah, they're never going to play unless they have to. Almost betting Siemian might re-sign with the Vikings, but with that cap space that the Vikings don't have, free agency is not going to be too well for the Vikings. Kirk Cousins is a pretty durable quarterback, I would say. So yeah, but there'll be more on Kirk Cousins at the end of our show. Yeah. Well, just to go off a little bit on what we talked about last week with the NBA free agency, and so we talked about how Anthony Davis didn't end up getting traded. Yep. And in his first performance back, he Handed it to the Timberwolves, not going to lie.
They did hand it to the Timberwolves, but he only had 3 points.
This past game, he had 3 points. And
in the past game, he only had 3 points and like 5 rebounds or something.
So his first game back, he had like 32 points.
Right.
And then over the span of his last 2 games after that game, he had like 8.5 points.
Yeah.
So
and when I was watching one of his highlights, he was just throwing up some like ridiculous shots, just kind of throwing them up. And,
yeah.
And see, if I was Anthony Davis, I would be going nuts. Like, I would be trying to get 40 points a game. But
I can understand why he's not playing as well as he is, because he doesn't want to be there. His teammates know he doesn't want to be there.
Fans don't even want to be there to watch them.
No. They're better off doing the trust the process Sixers, like I've said recently. Just tank, see if they can get top 4 pick, and hopefully that resets their franchise. And they should have moved Anthony Davis at the trade deadline.
I think they should have too, but they also had...
They should have taken the the trade option from the Lakers, where they offered pretty much their entire team.
I don't think they were ever really going to trade with the Lakers. I think that they were just toying with them. But
that is true, but that was the best offer.
That was the best offer, and it was definitely an offer. Since they're losing Anthony Davis anyways, they might as well get.
Well, they still have him under contract for another whole year.
Right, they do, but they're not like
they have no chance
stupid to try and get rid of him.
Yeah,
or try and not trade
when
him
he's
and
a free
get some
agent.
value, because they know that they're going to lose him in free agency.
Yeah, free agency, he's gone.
So if they're smart, they're gonna trade him so they can at least get some value for him, other than just having a clear cap.
And it was actually
space.
courteous of him to say, "Hey, I'm not going to resign." So
right, I mean,
do something.
To me, for me, players that do that before their contract is up, like, I'm not a big fan of that. Like, you signed a contract to play somewhere for a certain amount of time, and you should have to honor that, no matter whether you're happy still or not, or you think your team's going to win. If you sign a contract for a certain amount of time, you should have to follow what you signed. And Anthony Davis isn't doing that, and we see that with a lot of players that don't like their situation. And at the end of the day, the players are the ones that are in control, because they're the ones on the court, on the field. But that's just something that doesn't sit as well with me.
And I understand your point, but I have to disagree. I think because in the NBA you have your bird rights, and you're not a unrestricted free agent until you're like in your upper 20s, if I remember right. It's kind of like hockey. You're going to get your contract matched up until a certain age, or I think it's years served. But regardless, he is stuck in New Orleans until he is an unrestricted free agent. And the team drafted him number 1 overall. You always have that spot in your heart with the team that drafts you because they wanted you.
They haven't given him any help.
That's on management, as far as I understand their GM and basketball operations. They don't know what they're doing. And with that's on them. They should be fired. I don't think they have the correct management to put up a decent team. And it's their fault Anthony Davis is leaving.
Right, they couldn't keep him happy.
They couldn't even do anything with Rajon Rondo. Granted, he's past his prime. And
except for that shot he had against Boston, that buzzer beater in the Garden.
Yeah, that was something.
Are you guys going to get to go to a Celtics game when you go out there?
That'd be playoff season.
Oh,
what Zach is referring to is I'm on the Boston Global, or the Harvard Global Case Competition, which takes place at Harvard Yard in Cambridge. And that's only if the Celtics make the playoffs and actually get... It's at the last week of April, so it depends how their scheduling is. But we're for sure going to a Red Sox game.
Oh, that'll be nice.
And we're going to try and sit in the right field corner, where the wall is super low.
Mm-hmm.
And all you just
catch a home run.
Yeah. We'll see how that works. Hopefully.
Yeah, I was on the case that case study team that Greg just mentioned last year, and when we were in Boston, we had to decide between the Red Sox game and the Celtics game. And we chose the Celtics game because it was game 1 against Milwaukee of the first round. But that was also in the beginning of April, or second week of April, and you're going at the end. So that would be more like conference championship.
And those tickets for even the nosebleeds, I'm not sure how much you paid for yours, but Tickets we could get at Fenway Park, $30 at the cheapest. Yeah. I'm assuming to get a conference championship nosebleed section at Boston, $300 at the minimum.
Yeah, for sure. Especially in the Garden.
Especially in TD Garden. So yeah, we have a strict budget for our own personal wallets, and as college students, as much as we enjoy sporting events, can't quite afford a
Sometimes
$300 ticket.
we paid over $100 for our tickets at the Celtics game.
Sometimes you got to treat yourself. Yeah,
you got to treat yourself when you're on vacations like that, especially ones paid for by the university. But why don't we move on to some state news, and you tell us a little bit about some baseball news out of the Twin Cities.
So the Twins decided to lock up their core players, and with that I mean Jorge Polanco. Granted, he had a bout with PEDs for the first half of the season.
Yeah, what baseball player hasn't, though?
True. It's just in terms of do they get caught or not.
Yeah.
And I think the Twins had a very, very good offseason. They agreed to terms with Buxton, Gibson, Kepler, Trevor May, Jake Odorizzi, and Taylor Rogers, Ed Rosario, and Sano for one-year contracts.
Not Bryce Harper.
Not yet, but I heard he might go to San Francisco. Mm-hmm. More on that later.
Yeah.
But they also signed Jonathan Scoop. They have Lucas Duda to a minor league contract. But the bigger one is they have contract extensions in place with Jorge Polanco and Max Kepler, where Jorge they're pretty close to agreeing to a 7-year extension worth $25 million guaranteed, and the last year will be a club option. He's very, very good, underrated, I'd say. When he came back the second half of the season last year, he hit .288 with like 6 home runs and 100-some at-bats. He's not the home run hitter, but he's get on base and hit the ball around the park.
You need guys like that.
Yeah. Baseball is a home run game now. That's why Aaron Judge is so popular.
Bryce Harper,
who it's either home run, walk, or strikeout.
Pretty much.
And then they signed Max Kepler to a 5-year, $35 million contract extension, which I think is very key because he's one of my favorite Twins players. And I really, really hope they don't ever get rid of him. But I understand baseball's a business, and when you have blue-chip prospects like that, swaps are expected. Just like when the Marlins just traded JT Realmuto to the Phillies and got Sixto Sanchez in return, who is a top 10, top 15 prospect in the minor leagues. So with that, it's going to happen. You're going to have all-star caliber players that get traded in their prime for like 5 of your top 100 prospects in the system. This is the way it is. I believe the Twins farm system right now is in the top 15 and for best in baseball.
And I don't think that I think they're a lot under the luxury tax threshold.
Oh, they have a lot of money.
Yeah,
so
they're
Joe Mauer retiring, that saved a lot.
Right, yeah.
Much as I hate to see Joe go.
It was his time.
He was overpaid in his latter years.
Yeah.
It should have been a front-loaded contract, not a per annual.
Right, yeah, he wasn't very, he wasn't as effective.
When he had his bout with injuries late in his career, it's tough to see him underperform in terms of first baseman standards, because as a first baseman, you're expected to hit the ball out of the park 1 out of every 10 at-bats, and he hit like 275 and had 10 home runs on a season per average. But he'll retire as one of the greatest hitting catchers in the league.
Absolutely.
Ever.
He's what made me like baseball, to be honest.
And considering that Twins weren't necessarily your favorite team growing up, that's great to hear. It warms my heart that the Twins are good for something.
Well, him and Roy Halladay, rest in peace, Roy.
Yep.
But
hopefully future Hall of Famer there too.
Yeah, this year.
Yep. Should be on the. I don't know why you have to wait 5 years in order to be Hall of Fame eligible.
Right. Well, no, this was his 5th year, and I think he's on the ballot. But his wife didn't want to choose between the Phillies and the Blue Jays, so he's just on. He's going into the Hall of Fame as just like a player. He's not going in as a Blue Jay or a Philly.
He'll probably have both jerseys.
Yeah, he'll probably have both jerseys set up in his little area or whatever. But
yeah. But it's just weird to see that, okay, players have to wait a certain year after retirement.
Yeah.
never really truly understood why.
I don't understand why, but one reason I can think of is that it kind of gives the opportunity for people to stop thinking about them, and and then you can really like honor them and respect them and give them the attention that they deserve. Because if if they just retire, they're getting all that attention for all those years, and then you go right into the Hall of Fame, and you never really thought about again. So,
I'll agree with you at that point. That's the best way to put it. But to move on here, we have our segment Grinding Our Gears, and it's going to be hockey related this week. It seems to be always hockey because our favorite teams are really on our nerves. Zach, kick it off, please.
Well, my last time on Grinding Our Gears, I talked about the Winnipeg Jets and their struggles with their star player, and my other favorite team in the NHL. And I just want to give a little disclaimer as to why I have two favorite teams, and it's the reason that being raised in Winnipeg, I was born in 1997 when there was that was the year after the Jets had left. So I kind of had to, go with another team because we didn't have a hometown team. And I chose the Ducks because Teemu Selanne, and Randy Carlyle, who I'm about to be talking about, he was their coach, and Teemu Selanne was their star player. So I naturally went with them because they both used to play in Winnipeg.
You had connections.
So I had a connection through that. And, I just want to talk about how the Ducks have been grinding my gears because they've hit a decade low in the last 15 years. They're sitting 7th in the Pacific Division and next to last in the Western Conference. 3 days ago, General Manager Bob Murray fired Randy Carlyle, and he himself took over the coaching responsibilities to try and save the culture in Anaheim, which I personally believe is just him trying to save his job because, naturally, once the coach gets fired, if there's still a lack of success, it's going to be the GM next, especially in hockey.
Yeah, when heads roll, it's coach and then GM.
And the thing is, I was, like I said before, a huge fan of Randy Carlyle, a huge fan as well as Teemu Selanne. He's not there anymore. But Carlyle was with Anaheim from 05 to 11, won them their only championship. He only missed the playoffs once. He had a stint with the Leafs for a couple years, and then he came back and has been with Anaheim since 2016. They made the playoffs in both 17 and 18. This year, they're not going to make it. So
unless a miracle happens. They are only 6 points behind the Wild for the final wild card spot. Right,
and the Wild are also not looking so good right now.
No.
So, it's definitely possible. So this shakeup, it doesn't grind my gears that they shook things up. I think that they kind of had to. What grinds my gears is that, the hardworking physical culture that was the Anaheim Ducks for so long has now apparently changed, and people just don't seem to care, and the players just don't seem to care. But, they have an old group. There's a lot to look forward to. It might suck for a while, but they have a good young core, and Andre Kasha, Ricard Raquel, Hampus Lindholm, Nick Ritchie, those are all guys that are, they're not even 30 yet. So they still have a lot of good core guys going forward. But I guess we can talk about the Wild and why they're grinding your gears.
When aren't the Wild grinding my gears? As I've recently stated, they're in the last wild card spot for the Western Conference. And to be completely honest, Vancouver is 2 points behind them. And the entire wild card is in play for all the bottom dweller teams. Because looking at the standings, Dallas is third in the Central, 63 points, and Vegas is third in the Pacific with 66. Which is surprising compared to how they did last year to how they are now. But after the Blues, who are sitting at 61 and the Wild at 59, the Canucks are at 57, Arizona's at 55, Colorado's at 55, same as Chicago.
Chicago's terrible.
I know.
It's interesting to see Chicago, Anaheim, and LA at the very bottom of the Western Conference when for so long they were always the teams at the top.
Because for a span of, 5 years as LA and Chicago winning trophies, winning the Stanley Cup alternating years.
Usually with Anaheim as the best team in the conference, but blowing it in the playoffs.
Hey, as a Wild fan, we understand.
Yeah.
It must be the Bruce Boudreau effect. But with that being said, I think it's time for the Wild just to blow everything up. They're not truly in contention. They're sitting in the final playoff spot, but they're gonna.
The Kings won as an 8 seed one year.
Miracles
possible.
Do happen.
It's possible, but it's very unlikely, especially for the Wild because they're cursed because they play in Minnesota.
The state of hockey represent, right?
State of hockey represent with no championships.
Yeah. But let's try not to talk about that. Our championships were stolen when the North Stars moved down to Dallas and won the Stanley Cup in like 2 years with Mike Modano.
I can respect that point.
So you hear that, Dallas? You stole all their Stanley Cup. That was ours. And also meant the owner's fault for just moving him. But anyways, not all player trades that the Wild have been doing, like Justin Kloos for Pontus Aberg, who I haven't even heard of his name watching Wild games after the first day we got him. Haven't heard of the dude. I don't even know does he even play anymore? And then we had Victor Rask, who I believe really rolled his ankle because he stepped on a puck and he couldn't get off it. Then he was going to the bench in very obvious pain. These 1-for-1 trades aren't going to help the Wild for their future. They got to rebuild. They got to start young. They got to hope they get good draft picks and good spots in the draft and actually hit a home run. Don't take the Marcus Johansson or whoever the heck they drafted in the end of the first round last year. Some no-name guy that's a safe bet who's going to play out in 5 years down the road. They need to start building for the future. And, they should be getting prospects that are going to be NHL ready within 3 years. Granted, that's hard, and you need top 10 draft picks for players like that. But they're not going to get there with the average roster they currently have. I think Coyle's the next to go, and I hope they get a first rounder and some sort of prospect for him. Now, I don't know what kind of pull he can actually get in the NHL, but I heard there's rumors Jonas Brodin is also on the trade block. I don't think they'll trade Spurgeon, even though there was talks early in the year that I believe is Mitch Marner for Jared Spurgeon.
No. It's not going to happen.
No, I know it's not going to happen, especially after recent signings.
Toronto's not going to trade any of their young core.
No, and I understand that, but the case to be made there was Toronto's in desperate need of right-shot defensemen and defensemen in general.
Yeah.
And they had a surplus of forwards with John Tavares signing there.
Yeah, they do have a lot of good forwards.
It would have been a stupid trade, not going to lie.
We're going to see on trade deadline day because the NHL trade deadline is notorious for being like the most active trade dedeadline of any of the big four sports.
And I remember the last big trade we had was Martin Hansel. We saw how that turned out. Really, really happy about that trade. So just the Wild in general are always going to grind my gears until I actually figure out how to run their roster. Granted, I'm just a sports fan, so what do I know?
Right.
I'm just another person with an opinion. But I really hope Paul Fenton figures it out because the last thing I need is another 93-point season and a first and second round playoff exit.
I think you guys just need. Well, you're never going to get that with Bruce Boudreau as coach because he's known for missing the playoffs wherever he's also or making the playoffs as a high seed and then not going anywhere with it.
Yeah, but the issue with that though is he believes in a hard hitting check. Where players go around and check.
That style of hockey's old.
It's old school.
It's outdated now with how fast players are playing.
We have when you hear the Minnesota Wild, what do you hear? Who is the fastest skater? Jason Zucker. Name the next fastest skater we have. That's it.
Yeah.
When you hear all the other teams, who's their fastest skater? Let's go Toronto. Austin Matthews is pretty fast. Mitch Marner, William Nylander. Those guys are all fast.
All young guys.
Any young guy in
you guys aren't going to get it done with Mikko Koivu still on your roster
who is out for the season with a torn ACL.
Yeah. Well, we're going to move on to some campus news. The baseball team had a doubleheader today at Central Missouri. The first game they lost 19-2, and then the second game they lost 12-2 in the second game.
So they lost all three games then? Because I remember
they only had two today.
They had one yesterday where they lost 12-5.
Okay, yeah. So
is one game on the 13th, which was yesterday, and then 2 games today for the doubleheader.
These are just preseason games against teams that are outside of our conference. So don't be discouraged by hearing scores like that. But it's also a senior weekend for the men's and women's basketball teams here at UMC. On Friday, they will play Minot at 5:30 and 7:30, ladies first. And on Saturday, they'll play against Mary at 3:30 and at 5:30, ladies first again. And we'll give a shout out to all the graduating seniors for senior weekend. For the women's team, we have Caitlin, Isi, and Maria all going out and playing in their last games. And then for the men's team, we have Gable, Chase, Josh, Darren, and Aaron all playing in their last games. So congrats on a great career, guys.
Very thankful for what you've done for Crookston sports here.
And the memories of going to your guys' games, absolutely. And lastly, the equestrian hunt seat team is in action at South Dakota State, where they'll go against Texas Christian and South Dakota State as well this weekend.
And to quickly wrap up our ridiculous sports wrap-up, Kirk Cousins did a Twitter fan event giveaway. Now, most Viking fans, we could clearly state how that could have gone. So as we could guess, it didn't go well for him, and many fans, to briefly abbreviate what they responded, they told him to give away his huge contract, give away his signing bonuses. They wanted to have him give away all his money so they could sign tackles and guards to defend him. They wanted to give the team wins against a winning team instead of only beating the losing teams in the NFL. And they even wanted his signed resignation. I had a nice chuckle about all of that.
Yeah, I mean, again, I'm a big Kirk Cousins fan, but
really good at Michigan State.
He's very good at Michigan State, but yeah, Minnesota's a tough sports crowd to please. So, I hope the Vikings suck next year, but I hope Kirk Cousins plays well.
We'll see how Aaron Rodgers and his
But we already know how he's going to play. It's just a matter of how his team plays. Yeah, it's just a matter of how his team plays.
But that's a topic for another day.
Yeah.
So to wrap up this episode, please check us out on Spotify, iTunes, SoundCloud, and YouTube. Remember to look us up on Twitter at CallAudiblePod, and we'll see you next week, and have a happy Valentine's Day with your significant others, everyone.
Bye now.
Calling an Audible is made possible through the assistance of the University of Minnesota Crookston Media Services Department and executive producer James Pagachnik. The views expressed on Calling an Audible are not necessarily the views of the University of Minnesota Crookston or its affiliates.